PodcastOne presents the Steve Austin Show Classics.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Steve Austin Show. Coming to you from the Broken Skull Ranch. Riding down a dirt road in my 96 Ford Bronco. We got the windows open. If you hear the wind blowing through here, my air conditioner's broke. And I've had so many problems with the maintenance issues out here at the Broken Skull Ranch, I ain't got time to haul this damn thing in and get the air conditioning fixed. Welcome to the family-friendly show. This is Steve Austin. Riding down the road with my good buddy Ted Fowler, 361 on Twitter. And I told Teddy, I said, hey, man, I got to make up about 30 minutes of content for the part 2 of my Bray Wyatt podcast. And so I said, man, Teddy, I don't know what to talk about. We just got finished with Thanksgiving, and that was a big blowout. Are you glad Thanksgiving's over?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
God dang, man, I had a blast. My family was down here, my mom, my dad, my sister, her kids. I guided my niece, Emma, on a hunt, and she killed a wonderful 9-point buck. Thing will probably go, between 135 and I think 138, and it was fun watching her do that. We couldn't put Neil on anything. And then my brother and his wife came down. You were here, and it was a big blowout. And then they busted out the guitars last night and started singing. But, dude, my family has been here for 5 days. And, man, when you're entertaining. I drank so many damn beers, ate so many pecan pies, pumpkin pies, and all the turkey and dressing. Dude, we got to go back to six-pack Saturday night because now I got to get my weekly beer in. I'll go back to my little one glass of wine. How are you feeling on a physical level? Because we've been able to start stringing consistency together with our workouts, but my nutrition plan has went out the window.
Physically, I feel good. I feel good with the workouts we're having. It's just all of the food. Like I said yesterday, I feel like I'm carrying around twins. Been eating so much. Yeah, get back to our regular program.
What I got to do, though, I got to get back on my water because normally, in L.A. or whatever, I always like to drink about a gallon of water.
Right.
A lot of people don't drink enough water, and I'm probably drinking like one of those 12-ounce bottles a day, and that ain't quite copacetic. And then my damn IPA beer is a little bit high calorie. And I don't really feel like I've gained a ton of weight. It's just the fact that, after I got through with Broken Skull Challenge, gearing up to come down here, and then when I got down here, it took me a week to just de-stress and start relaxing and getting into a groove because I'm coming from L.A. in the city, that routine that I had, and that work schedule from 2 back-to-back reality shows, and now it's almost like I come out here and I, don't know whether, how to get back on track. Jumped on the mower a little bit, started cutting. We got a lot of grass to cut. And you're down here for the long haul now for the rest of deer season, right?
Correct. Yeah, until, mid to tail end of January. Pretty good little vacation.
Now, we got deer season going in full swing here. Now, we haven't been seeing all of our good deer yet. It's been so green. The deer really aren't coming to corn. But yesterday I was sitting in a particular deer stand and saw, one of our bigger bucks that we've been watching for a couple of years. And, man, I was happy to see that deer because sometimes it's so green out here in this brush country. Because of all the rain that we've had, and we've been lucky to get this rain, but we ain't seeing the deer yet. And I'm thinking, hey, man, where did all of our deer go? So that was a joyous moment, and I had my camera. I always carry my camera to the deer stand, folks, and I had this long-ass lens on there, and I thought I was getting these great pictures. And for some reason, somehow, I pushed a damn button on that camera, and all my pictures looked like it was just midnight out there in broad daylight, and you can barely see the horns. I one of the best deer on the ranch. It felt like someone kicked me in the stomach. I was mad as a damn hornet. Have you seen anything good, Teddy?
Some decent deer, nothing on the top shelf. But, it's still early, it's still hot. Let me make sure this recorder's still going since you're...
Oh, yeah, man.
not only having problems with the recorder, the camera, too.
God dang it, man. We lost 40 minutes of content the other day, and we turned that show when y'all listened to that show. It was a damn good show. That was a redo. But anyway, we got the record button. Hey, Teddy, let's switch gears here, man.
All right.
You and I know each other about 8 years. You've been a pro wrestling fan for how long?
Long time, 20, 25 years.
Okay, we got a little bit of time to kill here because I need 2 segments before I continue my conversation with WWE Superstar Bray Wyatt. And let me go ahead and preface this. I complained on the last podcast about how bad the quality was on that podcast, and people that listened to it said, no, it really wasn't that bad. Well, that's because Stacy back at PodcastOne in Beverly Hills cleaned it up and took out all the distortion and all the delays. So what y'all heard was the sweetened up version. What had happened, because I had to call in a conference line and Bray had to call into a conference line. That created that lag, and that's why I was working with, and it was so hard to have a conversation with a very articulate, eloquent, intelligent guy like Bray Wyatt. It was like pulling teeth on my end because of the discombobulation with the sound. So after I talked with Bray for about an hour, and we were looking to do a 2-hour show, I hung up and I dialed back, and I said, "Hey, dude," I said, "you got another 30 minutes left in you." He goes, "Hey, man, I'm just happy to talk to you. I got as much time as you want." But the conversation, Teddy, was so frustrating because of the discombobulation in the sound. What the people heard was a sweetened up version. What I was hearing was an audio cluster muck. So I got to build in a little time, so I thought we'd shift gears. Since you're a longtime wrestling fan, as long as you've been out here, we talk wrestling, when we talk wrestling, but that's probably 10% of our conversations?
Yeah, correct.
So since you've been a longtime fan and you grew up in the Phoenix area, what territory did you grow up watching? And when did you first fall in love with pro wrestling?
Man, my grandma used to watch it. I can remember going over to her house. I can remember the old school wrestling magazines. You know, the guys with I remember how scarred up their foreheads were from always, cutting themselves. And I can remember my grandmother yelling at the TV, getting all fired up when a wrestling match was going on.
Well, let me ask you something. If you saw those old pictures of guys from all the blade jobs that they're doing, what did you think about that? At that time in your life, you got to be thinking, what the F?
I thought
what is wrong with these guys' heads?
Yeah, I thought those guys were some of the meanest individuals on the planet. They just, the way that they carried themselves and that appearance, somebody that would get in a fight, which was a fight, the way that I saw it, and to get that bloody, like, holy cow, man, I can see getting a bloody nose or a bloody lip, but how hard you got to get hit to have your forehead bleeding?
What did you enjoy? I just remember when I grew up in Edna watching, and I've told the story so many times, I give you the condensed version, changing channels, finding Houston wrestling, smoke-filled arena, 2 guys, it was dimly lit, and fighting over a championship gold belt. And I was hooked, dude, because I wanted to believe it was real.
Right.
And at that point, for many years of my life, it was real. And hell, when I got into the business in '89, Chris Adams, the guy who trained me, didn't even smarten me up going into my first match ever on television and working with Frogman LeBlanc. And that was when I just found out that it was a work. When did you finally realize something was going on, and did you believe, like I did, that it was totally real when you was a kid?
Oh, I totally believed it was real when I was a kid. I think, into my 20s.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Same with me, dude.
Yeah.
And then when in my 20s, it was kind of like, okay, there's something going on, but I don't know what's going on.
Right.
And then I would hear the stories from the guys in the sportorium, okay, like if they want to do a certain move, they tap the guy's wrist a few times. It's almost like sending Morse code. Was the first way that I heard guys communicated in the ring was tapping each other, which is not. Sometimes if you squeeze a guy's wrist, that's called giving him the office.
Right.
Like when to do something or are you okay? They just give you the office, let you know they're okay. But there was no tapping. There was no Morse code to be found.
I remember the first time you told me that about squeezing a guy's wrist, to make sure he was okay.
Right.
And I was, I was just flabbergasted. I was like, man, I had no idea you guys did that in the ring. Why would you worry about if the other guy, if you really truly hurt him?
Yeah.
But it makes sense. There's so much unseen stuff that goes on that if you're sitting in your living room watching it, you got no idea. So it's cool to sit here and talk with you about it and learn about it. It's very
okay,
cool.
So then if I turn the microphone over to you and I say, okay, Ted, we're riding down the road. You got any pro wrestling questions?
Man, did you ever, really dislike a guy just for whatever reason and have a match with him and, try to hurt him?
No, man, I never did that. There was a couple of guys, like when I finally got a little bit of stroke at Stone Cold, that I chose not to work with just because I didn't really want to work with them. But it wasn't because it was really to protect my gimmick than anything. Or if I just didn't like somebody, that was when I had the power that I could veto a storyline. But there was really never any time I got into a ring with anybody. And really in my whole life, I'm actually a pretty friendly guy. A lot of people, when you watch Stone Cold Steve Austin, wouldn't think that. But never with any intention to go out there and try to hurt somebody. And then again, man, dude, I wasn't the biggest guy in the territory. Wasn't the smallest guy in the territory, so there's been a lot of guys that go in there with that mentality, and they're not. And everybody kind of knows about them. You know, certain guys, I won't mention names, guys in the past that would take liberties because they could. I was never that guy, man. I just wanted to go out there and not even really take a high percentage of the match. I was always a guy that wanted to go 50-50 with just about anybody I got in the ring with. But when I first came into WWF, and I'm segueing from your question, so no, I never intentionally went out there to ever hurt anybody because you're giving a guy your body and he's giving you his. So there has to be that type of trust. But certainly, you know, when I first rolled into WWF and I was working with some of the guys that I work with, you know, a lot of those matches were 90-10, you know, my percentage of offense to theirs to get over. So no to that question.
Now, what if the guy on the other end had a chip on his shoulder with you, you know, and you go in there and you start calling the match and you get a vibe that, hey, you know what, this guy's not working, you know, with me. How do you handle that?
Well, see, that's when a shoot and a work type attitude in a work situation turns out to a bad match. You know, case in point, well, Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart rubbed each other the wrong way for a long time. And, you know, like in their Iron Man match, it was a 60-minute match, and it was a hell of a match. And I believe if, you know, I could ask one of these guys and clarify this, but I believe that Shawn called 30 minutes of that match and Bret called the other 30. They called each other's, you know, stuff. And it turned out being a good match, and you can see some real snug work in there, but it was all professional. But those guys didn't like each other at all. And at one time they got in a fight backstage, but anytime they went into the ring, it was totally professional. I got to get a picture of these javelina.
Yeah.
We're going to interrupt the story. I got a long lens here on my thing. I'm going to push the pause.
Now there they go. All but the
javelinas run off. Okay. We're driving around in these ranch roads and javelinas run off. But anytime, it's like if you got two guys that go out there and don't want to have a match or they don't like each other, it's like, hey, man, if I grab you by your wrist and I say, hey, man, watch a clothesline, and you don't want to go in for a clothesline, all you got to do is hook the rope with your right arm and say, you know, start squatting on what I'm calling. And so that's discombobulation. There's a famous match, and I can't remember the hows and whys of how it went down, but it was Bruiser Brody working with Lex Luger in a cage. And then Brody started no-selling Luger's offense for some reason, and I think Luger at this time in his career might have been kind of green, and Luger didn't know what a crap or wind his watch. Right. And so he ends up climbing out of the cage, and you can watch this on YouTube, and he climbs out of the cage and leaves the ring because he's scared of Bruiser Brody because Bruiser Brody was a bad dude. Right. And so that was a case of something, you know, and I can't remember if you read all the little comments underneath that match on YouTube what was actually going on. But, dude, to answer your question, if you ain't got two guys out there that want to cooperate, you ain't going to have a good match. And so guys can, you know, even if they don't like each other, they can work snug. If a guy is lighting you up too much, you know, that's a potato. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, finally, if, you know, I was always real good about taking a couple of potatoes. I'd give a guy several before I sent back a receipt. And it was never in a mean-spirited way, and I never thought anybody was ever trying to take advantage of me. And even when we went to Japan, you know, Japan guys are known as working real stiff or snug. And when I was going over on my first trip, I'd only been in the business a couple of years, so I was a little I was wondering how it was going to go down. Right. And Arn Anderson was on the same trip with me down there, and of course Arn had been I think had been to Japan a couple of times and was obviously a very, very good professional wrestler, one of my favorites. And nobody ever tried to take advantage of Arn. He was the enforcer, and he had that credibility, that body of work. I hadn't had the body of work that he had, but nobody tried to stiff or snug me. And if they did, I like to work snug and stiff anyway, but over there they call it strong style, and I wasn't really a big fan of strong style where they club the hell out of each other. So that's about the extent of bad things going. Now, certainly there's going to be other people, if you ask the same question, they might have went out there, but you can count on probably 3 fingers the amount of shoot matches that happen in a pro wrestling ring. You go back to some of the Danny Hodge days when Danny Hodge was a badass wrestler out of Oklahoma. He was a legend, one of Jim Ross's good friends. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, and he was, he was a couple of time All-American wrestler. And Danny's probably, 72, some odd years old. Now, Danny had these grips. His hand strength was so strong that if he just grabbed you by the wrist like that, you would go uncle. And that's how he won a lot of his matches back in his amateur days. And he could squeeze apples and bust them. There's an old legendary story of him going into a hardware store and just grabbing pliers and just crushing them by the handles and breaking them. So there was a couple times I think Danny Hodge had come to Jesus meetings with some guys in the ring, and once they knew what was up, they didn't proceed to try to, do anything to Danny, because Danny was one of the saltiest guys in the history of the business.
Did Vince ever have to, I get it, everybody's a professional and you're doing your job, but did Vince ever, get involved after the match, and kind of say, hey, you guys knock it off, or what happened here, why,
I'm sure there was a lot of meetings about stuff that happened in the ring. I know one time Ric Flair was working up in New York, working for Vince, and I think he was working with Savage. I could be mistaken, but nonetheless, for some reason at that time, Vince had a little bit of a hard-on for Flair, and Flair didn't do exactly what Vince had wanted. And, of course, Ric Flair, in my opinion, one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. He's my favorite.
Right.
And so he kind of knows what's going on and how to go about doing it, but he didn't follow Vince's specific instructions. And so they sent him back to the ring, and they did basically the same damn match, but did it to Vince's direction of what he wanted. So there's been several times when promoters have had, and Bill Watts, Bill Watts was legendary in Mid-South territory, and Jim Ross could vouch for this. He would tell you exactly what he wanted, and it was then you'd go out there and paint the picture, but he would give you the broad strokes of, hey, man, here's how it's going to go down. Now, you guys go out there and work your ass off, but here's the finish, and here's what I want to accomplish with this match.
Right. How do you deal with, in your mind, the way that your character, where your character is going. You know how you want to be, viewed by the public. When Vince or whatever promoter you were working for wants you to do something that goes against the grain of where you want to go, how receptive are they to your suggestions? That's
an outstanding question. You got to be able to stick to your guns. It's like, when many times in my career they say, hey, man, we want you to go out there and do this, blah, 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 whatever. And I'd just look at them and say, hey, man, my character wouldn't do that.
Right.
And I can understand you want to push the boundaries or the limits of some stuff. It's like when I turned heel. I totally was able to jump out of the box and do comedy and all kinds of stuff that I would have never done as an aggressive babyface who worked with a heel work style. But as far as knowing your character and being able to stand up for your character, that's what's kind of lacking today with regards to a lot of the WWE superstars. They're forced to go out there. Not forced, that's a bad word. A lot of people don't feel they have the stroke or the weight yet to say, hey, this is my character, and I wouldn't do that. When the writers are saying, no, we've been telling you what to say, this is what your character would say. So you've got to have that belief and live that character. Bray Wyatt's been an outstanding example of someone who's been able to stand up for his character because he's evolved into Bray Wyatt from Husky Harris, third-generation wrestler, and it's a political tightrope that you walk, and there's etiquette and there's manners to how you argue your side of it. You don't just go in there with no stroke or just say, hey, F you, I wouldn't do that. You got to say, hey, that sounds cool, but I'm not really feeling it because my character would do this. Mm-hmm. It's all about the relationship and how you nurture and present your side of the scenario. But yeah, I was famous for doing that. But I was also bad. Triple H one time said, hey, man, a lot of times Stone Cold would come to the locker room, and this is not really on a character thing, but just a big idea thing. We're about to shoot Monday Night Raw. And I would roll in. They say, hey, Steve, this is what you're doing. I say, no, I ain't. And, well, what do you want to do? I don't know, but I ain't doing that.
Right.
I never would offer up a suggestion or an alternative game plan. And so a lot of people thought Triple H was blasting me. No, he wasn't. He was telling the exact truth. I was kind of a prick back in if I didn't like creative. But don't get me wrong, I couldn't be a prick when I first got there as a ringmaster. I walked to the ring like a deaf mute with Ted DiBiase talking all that trash for me. So, but when I could turn into Stone Cold and I really believed in myself and we started drawing money, that's when I stood up for myself.
Could you, the management always, or do they always want to know a little bit of what you're doing before you go out? I mean, can you just be tight-lipped and say, you know what, I ain't saying nothing to nobody about anything until I get in the ring, and then it'll be a surprise to everybody?
Well, sometimes you can still pull that surprise out of your ass and do that. But, I mean, these days, I mean, with the way the cameras are working, and I don't know how many cameras they've got running these days, but you always have your hard camera. And, like, if this steering wheel that I'm holding in front of me, this is square, okay, the hard camera, the one that's in the bleachers mounted, might be on this side. So a lot of guys will work the hard camera, and then you got all these other cameras that are floating around and handheld. But there's so many different cuts, and you know, if there's a specific part of the match which they want to make damn sure they don't miss, you know, there's some blocking, as you would say in the acting. But yeah, there's a little bit of 4-1-1 exchange these days. The way the business is, there's a lot of that. So they know camera angles. They kind of have a grasp of what's going to happen. But that being said, you know, anything could happen at any time. There's a lot of guys who, when they'll pin a guy in the ring, they'll pin, and when they go for the pin, they're always looking at the hard camera because they want their face to be right there in the hard camera. Now, see, when I worked, I never worked for hard camera, ever.
Right.
They had 8 cameras there, and if you've got a handheld, and we know the finish, it's going to be a stunner or whatever it's going to be. Someone's going to be looking up the lights.
Right.
And I just, I never wanted to. I had so many things going on in my head, and just from a creative standpoint of listening to the crowd's reaction and calling stuff on the fly in the ring, or working off a fishbone menu of things that I knew I was going to do and executing, the last thing I ever wanted to worry about was which way I was facing and which way my opponent was facing. I didn't care. Yeah, I didn't care. That was one thing that I didn't concern myself with.
Interesting. Now, the writers, the number of writers today is far greater than what it was back when you were going.
Yeah.
Did you ever try to, hang out with those guys, have a beer, let them hang out with you as a person to kind of get a feel for, how you are and maybe work off of that?
No, man, I never really hung out with the writers too much. Back in the day, and it's interesting because this podcast that y'all are listening to on Tuesday, I just got finished interviewing Vince McMahon with on Monday, which is on live. And so me and Teddy are filming this the day before. We're going to Tulsa tomorrow.
Yep.
But this is afterwards as you watch that and you listen to this. What was the question? Oh, hanging out with the writers.
Yeah. Back
in the day, Vince used to book the territory with Pat Patterson in his mansion in Greenwich, his crib, out by the swimming pool. And they would just be out there with a long ledger notebook with pencils, and they were like making matches and doing cards and booking towns. And, the TV kind of followed, what they were doing there on the paper. And there weren't really any writers per se.
Right,
there was no writers.
Right.
There were bookers. You booked it, and then you knew your angle because it was a setup from week to week. And Vince liked to book. He would love to book, all the way up to a year and a half in advance. Now, you're not making all the matches right there, but he has a long-running picture about where he wants to go with his world champ, where he wants to go with his IC champ, his tag champ. But then, things started changing. The business started moving faster. Monday Night Raw started coming on. You got 2 hours of live TV, and for a long time it was still booking, but then you needed writers to start. That's a good question because I was in the business for as long as I was in, but I don't know when the quote-unquote writers really came on board, but I just thought it started remembering, Brian Gerwitz was one of the main ones and some of the other guys, and before you knew it, it went from having maybe 2 or 3 or 4 writers, because there had to be a start, and now I've heard tell as many as 26, 30 writers. And so here's the thing, man, I know now it's turned into a 3-hour live show, but 26 writers for 3 hours of television, man, that just seems a little extreme to me.
Are they writing the show the way they want it to unfold, or are they writing for a specific wrestler?
Both. And then these ideas are pitched to Vince, and then Vince gives, the blessing or
up,
no, come up
down.
with something
right,
else.
Right.
Hey, I'm sitting there rolling down a dirt road with Ted Fowler. We're going to take a little break. We're coming back as he's asking a global icon and a national treasure's questions, being a lifelong fan. Ted Fowler 361 on Twitter. We're coming right back.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
Hey, man, do you own or rent your home? Sure you do, and I bet it can be hard work. You know what's easy? Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy. It's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com. All right, here we are, riding down the road in a green and silver Ford Bronco. I've turned the microphone over to Ted Fowler. We're talking pro wrestling. Before we get to the second part of my conversation with WWE Superstar Bray Wyatt. Fire away, Teddy, what you got?
Question is, Bray Wyatt, he was, Husky Harris before he became Bray Wyatt?
Right.
A majority of the time when a character changes from one to the next, from Stunning Steve to the Ringmaster, who calls that? The wrestler himself getting stale with what they're doing, or does Vince have a light bulb come on and go, man, I got a new way that I want you to go, and you got to be a different person?
Well, it can happen many ways, and it's not always Vince's idea. Now, Vince, when I pitched, let's talk about me for a while. When Vince called me on the phone, I tore my tricep on that tour of Japan with Arn Anderson I just talked about. So I'm busted up. I go to ECW. I'm working. I'm cutting promos. Paulie dangerously. Paul Heyman helps me out tremendously. Phone rings. Vince pitches the idea of the Ringmaster. Okay, now the idea of the Ringmaster had been around for a long time. This was a gimmick that they wanted to drop on a guy, and he was going to be the master of the ring. So anyway, he figures, okay, so the Steve Austin guy's a mechanic. He would be okay for this Ringmaster idea. And I saw some of the old drawings from back in the day, and it was a way more high-tech look and finish than what I had when I first came into WWF, which was just money green trunks, which they wanted me to wear because the money green trunks was the same color money because Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, was my manager. Mm-hmm. But I had Hollywood Blondes boots on, money green tights, and they wanted me to wear a singlet as a Ringmaster. But I said, homie, don't play that. Ain't wearing no singlet. And so I didn't have any stroke, but I was going to stroke myself on saying no singlet. So when I rolled into WWF, that was his idea. And I knew at 6 months it wasn't going to work, and that's when I came up with the Stone Cold thing. And so that's when I pitched that to them. Now, here's the thing about Vince. He's always willing to listen to an idea. If you got a better idea than his, and don't get me wrong, at first, Vince doesn't care whose idea it is. And he's okay with taking credit for your idea as well. But at the end of the day, Vince is a businessman. I kind of say that as a rib. But with the Bray Wyatt thing, he's a third-generation wrestler. Blackjack Mulligan is his grandfather. Mike Rotunda, IRS, you remember him, is his father. Barry Windham and Kendall Windham are his, uncles, I guess, or cousins, whatever it is. And so he's a third-generation guy. He's a pretty big dude. He was, I think was an All-American wrestler and or state-level wrestler in high school and college, won a championship. And so when he comes out, Bray has that wrestler's type body. He's not all muscled up. Right. It looks like a bodybuilder. Yeah. So that name Husky Harris kind of lent itself to his build. And if, like I was watching, it was interesting in talking to him, when I watched some of the old Husky Harris videos or vignettes or interviews, you could see that little bit of Bray Wyatt in him back then, just the way the guy talked. But he hadn't developed into that character yet. So I think, once he kind of crapped out with Husky Harris, he approached the office. And, I think it was, like you said, he talked with Dan Spivey with the Waylon Mercy gimmick, which was a hell of a gimmick way back in the day. And he saw the movies that he watched, Cape Fear, and I believe that was his pitch to them.
Interesting. Hey, I know when you got hurt when you were wrestling Owen and he dropped you on your head, obviously you had more of the match lined out than what you got to work. You ever wrestled somebody and them get injured during the course of the match, and how do you handle that? I mean, I know you're he's going to let you know, hey, I just pulled something or I can't continue. How do you wrap that up if it's 2 minutes into the thing.
Dude, that's a total improvise, overcome, and adapt. It's a great question, but you're flying by the seat of your pants, and obviously you know what kind of time you got when you go out there, whether you're working a house show match or a television match or a pay-per-view. Now, I think under most circumstances, had I got dropped on my head at a house show, I don't think I would have tried to finish that match. I'd have just laid there.
Right.
But, when I was working with Owen, I got dropped on my head. There was a kiss my ass stipulation that the loser was going to have to kiss the other guy's ass. Hey, man, I was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, I was supposed to go over that night with a Stone Cold Stunner. But, I got dropped on my head. I was paralyzed. I was a transit quadriplegic for about a minute. Scared the hell out of me and really messed me up. But I'm figuring, man, I wouldn't even think I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's been how I operate as a competitor. I must finish the job at hand. So that's when I was able to lay there, and I told him, don't touch me because I can't move. And that's when I could finally start moving my arms and legs. And I told Earl Hebner, I said, tell him roll up for the win. It was the worst cradle in the history of the business, but I tried to. That was my way of getting out of the match. Many years ago, we were working on television, and it was a tag match, myself and Triple H against, I can't remember who the opponents were. I think it was Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. I can't remember. Someone just sent this into my questions at SteveAustinShow.com the other day. But Triple H blows his quad in the match and was able to, have the strength, determination, and guts to somehow finish the match. And dude, he tore his quad off his knee, whatever the scientific description of the injury was. He was screwed because they had to go in there and tie that tendon back down to his knee. But you just do what you got to do to make chicken salad out of whatever has been dumped in your lap, and that's just improvisational skills and common sense. And sometimes, it's just a flat out ring the bell. We got to have medical things go. We've got to have medical personnel out here. Check this out. We were at the Royal Rumble. I think it was the second Rumble I was ever in, my Battle Royal. And I was supposed to be the fourth guy out. It might have been my first, as a matter of fact. So your first year in the company, and you're going to be the fourth to last guy left in the ring, that's a pretty good rub.
Yeah.
You've weathered the storm from 30 WWF superstars, and now you're number 4. And going down to 3, 2, 1, and, whoever wins that gets the big push. So anyway, I was doing a spot with, I believe it was Fatu. I can't remember. One of the Samoans, and man, he had a lot of baby oil on, and all the guys were oiled up, and so the ropes were very slippery. So I was going to do a deal where he does something to me, and I was going to take a bump over the top, hang on to the top rope, come back in the bottom. Well, zip, boom, lost my grip, fall out on my keister on the apron down by the guardrail, and I'm thinking, oh, man, I'm the new guy in the company. They're trying to give me a little bit of a push here by letting me be the fourth last guy in the damn squared circle with 3 other badass superstars, and I blow it? Really? So I'm sitting there out on my ass, and I believe Sean was going over in that Royal Rumble, or he was an integral part of the finish. So, what I've got to do is, this is live. This is at the San Diego Sports Arena. There's 20,000 people there. It's on pay-per-view. I got to let him know that, dude, everything that, I had to do to, help you with the finish of the match, I'm gone.
Yeah, you're on your own now, pal.
So anyway, I'm sitting down on my ass, and Shawn Michaels, one of the greatest in-ring performers in the history of the business, and he can make chicken salad out of anything. So anyway, as I'm on the floor, I get up, and I make eye contact with Shawn, and I just kind of held up my hands. In a kayfabe style, I'm not just saying, hey, I got dumped on my ass. Here's a signal. Mm-hmm. You must do something and overcome this tragedy.
Right.
I just give him the Iggy, with the visual cue, like, dude, I'm out. I screwed up. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how Shawn fixed that. I'll even remember the finish to the Royal Rumble. But sometimes things happen that you can't control, and the rest of the guys just got to go on the fly. And that's when one guy will step up, and he'll be that ring general and come up with a general plan that's copacetic.
Right.
If someone's got a better idea, you call it and get it done in the process.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. You think the old school wrestlers work more snug than today's wrestlers?
I wouldn't say more snug. I would say a frog's hair more believable. There's a lot of guys that are snug right now in the business, there's a lot of sloppy work right now in the business, and I'm not saying that as a knock on the talent. I'm just saying because it's a very green crew. Man, you got to work your ass off for a long time. Like hell, I was watching the WrestleMania 13 match with myself and Brett, and at that stage in my career, I think I've been working 8 years, and that night, my working punch, I really thought it was more like a push punch than a punch. And being very critical of myself or my work, I was not, and I had a good working punch, but it wasn't on that night. So I think the older guys who had been seasoned and there were more veterans on the roster, I think the work was a little bit more, I would say, credible, not necessarily more snug. But you take a guy like Ricky Morton, you could take a guy like Bobby Eaton. Everything they did looked like $1 million, and it felt, I'm touching Ted's arm. I mean, that's the pressure you felt, but it looked professional.
Yeah.
It looked tight. There was no gaps. You grab a rear chin lock on a guy, there's no gaps in there. It's snugged up. That's the kind of things you would see on a veteran crew. And so, anyway, to answer your question, again, that's not throwing current talent under the bus. I'm just talking when you're talking with a veteran crew and a green crew, there's a big difference in the kind of work you're going to get out. And that comes from a psychological standpoint and the actual mechanical work itself.
Now, you guys, the wrestlers in the locker room, I mean, you're talking to, Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels, not those guys in particular, but younger wrestlers, trying to, give them a little insight, a little critique, their performance. Did, the Stooges,
Yeah.
Did those guys ever come to you or the other wrestlers and say, hey, you know what, this is what we think you need to polish up a little bit?
Yeah, man, you're talking about the Stooges, you're talking like Briscoe, Patterson, Slaughter, those guys?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, man, because those guys are highly respected by everybody in the locker room. And, man, when I first came in, I came in as a ringmaster, had a very physical, aggressive style, but, they were pushing everybody else that they had brought in before me. They're pushing, Mick. They're pushing Mark Henry. They were pushing Vader at the time. Johnny B. Bad, who was Mark Merrow. And I was kind of, like Plan 9 from outer space. But once the bell rang and I had a very physical style, those guys they would come up to me, and I'll never forget this. And George Animal Steel, Blackjack Lanza, Jerry Briscoe, Patterson, they said, hey, kid, he goes, you keep doing what you're doing. He goes, and this is before I turned into Stone Cold, but they could see the future or see that the work style was the bottom line with me. And they would tell me, he goes, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll get over. And it's going to take you longer to get over because you're not a gimmick like these other guys are. With all due respect, they were more character gimmick oriented than I was as a ringmaster. I was still that mechanic. But they told me, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll get over. And it ended up being very true. And anytime any of those guys would pull you aside and get in your ear, dude, that's just nothing but respect for those guys that would, give you some 411. It's like I like to try to help people out these days too. And going back to my USWA days when I was breaking in Dallas, Texas, I would ride down the road with Skandar Akbar and Bronco Lubitsch. And, Skandar was a manager at the time who had wrestled. Bronco was a referee at the time, but had wrestled for a long time. And I was riding in the back seat. I can't remember. I think it was a Delta 88 that Bronco had. And we would ride to some of the towns in Louisiana because, I didn't have nobody to hang out with. I wasn't really one of the boys yet.
Right.
I was just kind of breaking in. And listen to those guys tell me stories and talk about the psychology of the business. And, all those guys like, Jerry Briscoe, all the advice that those guys gave to me and all the other guys, it's very much appreciated. And you damn sure learn. Like Pat Patterson, a genius at finishes. And so, yeah, it's those discussions with those vets and those guys like Arn Anderson, the guys that are agents these days. They're helping these guys out because there's not a whole lot of guys that are still in the business that have been around as long as these guys that know the ins and outs of being a heel, a babyface, the mechanics of psychology, and the crowd manipulation skills. So, yeah, those guys are worth their weight in gold, in my opinion. And, speaking of guys that are worth their weight in gold, Jim Ross. I talked to Jim. You've been outside several times while I've talked to him, been down here at the ranch. But there's a guy who is nothing but chock full of a whole lifetime experience in the business. and can look at things so objectively and can be the best devil's advocate on any kind of business decision, booking decision that really is walking around on planet Earth right now. I don't consider really, with regards to finishes, Pat Patterson's great, but just general day-to-day working knowledge of what and how and why this should be done or that should be done, he's the guy.
Who do you think's a better ring announcer? Jesse and Gorilla Monsoon, which I love those guys, or Vince? You know what I mean, calling the shots.
Oh, dude, you're going back into the kind of old heyday type stuff. Those guys were the right time for the right the right voices there at the right time. I loved Jesse and Gorilla. Oh, Gorilla! And then and a lot of people that thought Gorilla was an average announcer. I loved Gorilla and the chemistry those two guys had together. And all of a sudden, you bring Bobby the Brain Heenan into the mix, and then you had because back in the day when Vince started announcing, I think it was '71. Vince Sr. was having a hard time with his commentary guy, his announce guy. So Vince always wanted in the business, but Vince's dad didn't want him in the business. And when the announcer wanted too much money, Vince Sr. said, "Hey, I'll see you down the road. And oh, by the way, Vince, we need you to start doing the announcing." So Vince was basically a white meat, babyface announcer, and very proper, and respectful, and told it like it was. And then he kind of started spinning it up, and he was very excitable. And so some things he did which were way over the top were kind of like, maybe not so much. But because he knew the big picture, and he was very, sometimes the displays of athleticism and those silly things that he said weren't so great. But I really enjoyed Vince on commentary because I appreciated his enthusiasm for the product.
See, I was a big fan of Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse. Those guys, they had me cracking up. Tag teams. We've spoken about this, right. The absence of them. I know when you and Brian were a tag team, there was a lot of them back in the day. You can make more money as a singles wrestler than a tag team, yes or no?
Yes, because, when it all comes down to it, if you're working in that main event spot, you got to split that. They're not, like Jim Ross just did a podcast about it, how wrestling payoffs are made. And, I think he ruffles some feathers. But at the end of the day, that formula has kind of been around for a long-ass time. So let's look at it this way. Because if you want to listen to that, you can go find the Jim Ross podcast. It was a recent one, and listen to him break it down in a scientific fashion. But say you've got 10 matches on the card, and you have, your house, your total money, you've got your gross, and then after paying all your bills, you got your net, you pay your talent. Okay, so here's your main event money, and instead of you and me are working on top. Mm-hmm. So we've got X amount of dollars to split between the two of us. You and me as a tag team, taking on the Road Warriors, we got 4 guys splitting main event money. So you're going to make less. Now, is it exactly half as much? No, because they could toss a little bit more in there. There's a formula, but there's also taking care of the guys as well. But theoretically, in theory, and really, yeah, you're going to make less money as a tag match. You're probably going to make less per person than you could as a single if you were a highly successful single. And there's been great tag teams, like let's take the Road Warriors. Those guys separately, maybe they wouldn't, in theory, got over like they did as individuals the way they did as a team.
Right.
So that would say, hey, we're going to make more as a tag team than we are as a single because we're better as a tag team. Get it?
Yeah. From the business standpoint, does a tag team, bring in as much revenue as a singles match? I mean, would they ever have a wrestling event where the last match, the main, was a tag?
Oh yeah, man, all the time. I mean, you go back to the Midnight Express days, Rock and Roll Express days, some of the greatest tag teams of all time, and the legendary feuds they had in there, and there was the proof in the pudding. I mean, a lot of times they put Midnight and Rock and Roll, I think, on the B squad, and they were outdrawing the A squad, which was Flair, Dusty, and the proof was in the pudding. So make no mistake about it. You get 2 badass tag teams with 4 badass stars, you can damn sure outdraw 2 singles guys any day of the week. But anyway, we're going to wrap this part of the conversation up. It's time to get to my conversation with WWE Superstar Bray Wyatt. I appreciate Ted Fowler asking me some questions and helping a brother out on the podcast. You can check him out on Twitter at TedFowler361. We'll catch you down the road.
You're listening to another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show, only on PodcastOne.
What's better than courtside seats? Free sports on Pluto TV. Hey sports fans, get all your sports free on Pluto TV. Pluto TV is your home for sports. Watch 24/7 channels of MLB, MLS, MMA, sports news and analysis, plus documentaries, TV shows, and movies, all for free. No signups, no fees, no contracts, ever. Download the free Pluto TV app on any device.
Steve Austin Unleashed.
Here I am sitting on my ass at the Broken Skull Ranch. All I did was hit the stop button and then hit the record button because I got some slow download speed to divide these two shows up. All right, Bray, how you doing? You feeling good?
I'm feeling great, man.
Man, when I look at some of my some of my favorite matches of all time, there's been some hellacious matches against technical wrestlers. Looking back, some of the things that you witnessed, what would be some of the favorite matches of Bray Wyatt that you were not a part of?
One match that I've taken a lot from in these past few years is Shawn Michaels and Mankind at In Your House.
Right.
Yeah, just the violence and the pace of that match in particular was, it was incredible. And some of the unique things that Mick could do attached with the unbelievable in-ring ability of Shawn Michaels. I have to pick that as possibly one of my favorite match of all time. But there's so many that I've taken from, so many that I've watched and admired. I always loved any combination of Vader and Stan Hansen.
Yep.
Or Vader and Sting is actually very fun to watch as well.
Yeah.
I just like kind of those brutal forces where in my eye I can tell that they're out there and they're just fighting each other, and that's really exciting to me as a viewer and as a fan of this business to watch and be able to try to pick apart, how exactly they put this thing together and what was going on in their mind. But I like any of those type of era matches, real violent and brutal ones. There's so many I could sit here and name them all day, but those are some of the few that stuck out to me.
When I see the Wyatt family as a whole unit, and you look at Luke Harper, he reminds me from a visual standpoint so much of Bruiser Brody. Were you a fan of Brody's work?
Oh, of course. I was actually watching him and Terry Funk the other night. Just go out there and just beat the hell out of each other. But I like Brody. I like Brody, how his pace was. And you were talking earlier about The Undertaker. The Undertaker just, flies around the ring and, you need a gas mask or an oxygen mask to keep up with him. And that's what it looked like with Brody, too.
Right.
Just standing tall and barking in your face, and you had to really just take him down. It looked like to keep him down, beat the hell out of him to get him to cooperate.
Oh yeah, if you wasn't in shape, he would eat your lunch up.
Oh yeah, huge Brody fan.
Hey, last week we were talking, and you were talking about your brother Bo getting into the FCW school before you and lighting the fire under your ass. How much sooner did he get into the school before you?
I think he was there maybe like 6 months before me-ish.
So what was it? Was you like a damn egg in a frying pan at that point saying, hey, man, I'm letting this stuff pass me by. I better jump on and get in this stuff?
Yeah, I couldn't hold it any longer. I had to get into it. I mean, it's an addiction, too, once you do cross that barrier, and even for me, before I couldn't stand being in my position anymore. Even though it used to be everything I loved, I could not stand to not be there. I would have given everything to jump in at first.
But as much as you enjoyed playing football and you were an All-American, did you see the writing on the wall of, hey, man, I'm good here. but playing in the pros, hey, maybe it's not going to happen. Were there dreams or aspirations of playing pro football, or you're like, going back to your roots, your calling card, the family business of pro wrestling?
Yeah. I mean, as you look at it, I was a center, and I was about 6'2". I had a good 40 time. I had real good strength. But in the NFL, everyone's 6'5".
Yep.
And, 6'6". And I could have pursued it, and it probably wouldn't have worked out the way I wanted it to. But that was not the driving factor in why I came here. It was more of, this is what I really wanted to do. And I had a great time while I was doing that. And it molded me and changed me from place to place. I went playing football. It really, looking back at it now, it really helped me, in this department. And also my amateur wrestling in, high school and how long I did that. And I actually almost pursued that in college as well.
Now, you were a state champion. You were a state champion in wrestling in high school. Have you ever thought to implement any amateur wrestling into the Bray Wyatt character? It doesn't sound like it fit, but that's where you come from. Have you used any of that background?
Well, I think, to explain this in a rational way, I was very unorthodox, even in amateur wrestling. My body just moves in a strange way, and I attack in a different way. I was not your smooth, I'm going to shoot on your leg and take you down and score points. I was, here I come, I'm going to whoop your ass.
Just a wild man.
Wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna come at you, and I can move. I was especially back then when I was lighter. I was very fast for a heavyweight, and I was just really mean.
Right.
I've always had that wild side to me, where especially if something didn't go my way, it was more of a close to a fist fight than it was a wrestling match from that point with me, which is why I think I won my state title, because I was just mean.
Hey, man, but I've always said, as a heel, I do believe you have to have a mean streak. As a baby face, you must have fire. So, I mean, if you're not willing to go out there and just punish the hell out of the person that you're working with, I mean, because there's one way to get heat. And you watch some of the classic guys that I used to really like, guys who weren't great athletes, but when they flipped the switch, they got mean. And Michael P.S. Hayes is one of those guys. He was just a cocky, arrogant heel. And he was a piece of trash, and he would back off and sometimes beg off. But when it came time to switch, flip the switch and get heat, he turned into a different person. Adrian Adonis turned into a different person. Ric Flair even turned into a different person. He was mean. And that's what I think is a big key to making a successful heel. And then on the other side of that, as a babyface, I mean, the guy has to have fire. There has to be some spark. And sometimes I think you can work with a person long enough that they understand this, but for the most part, you're either born with that competitive spark or that mean streak, and some people will never get it, and that's why they never ascend to a higher level, given the facts that everything else that they do is very good.
I agree with that 100%, man. There's a level of tenacity, and you see it in every sport in the world. You either have it or you don't. And it's a switch, and not everyone possesses it, which is why I think it makes people special that do have it. And I think my fuse comes from my father, who has the same type of fuse. It's okay, not anymore.
Right.
Now you're fine.
Right.
And I mean, it's easy to portray in wrestling, because it's easy to get mad and frustrated out there, and if you know how to channel it and now give it the right outlet and let it be a part of your match, they swim together wonderfully together.
Hey, man, it's always it's interesting for me to sit here and think. I mean, you're a third generation guy. I mean, so like if you're just sitting around at the dinner table or for a family gathering, I mean, would it be just like you and your father, Mike Rotundo, IRS? I mean, did y'all ever just sit there and just talk psychology or talk about the business, or did y'all leave that away from conversation? Because here was a guy who'd been around, speaking of at least Mike right now, your father, who'd been around for a long time, great psychology, great worker, very solid in the ring. Did y'all ever have those conversations where he'd say, hey, man, you might want to slow this down, or you might want to grab a hold here, or more transition, maybe work a spot here? Did you borrow any psychology from your father?
No, of course. I mean, we've had those talks, just like you're saying. But most of my life, we did kind of keep it away. And
right.
I prefer that too. Usually when I'm home, it's kind of, that is who I am there, and this is who I am here. But I've learned from him a lot of things, you know, especially not just in-ring stuff, but, you know, how to be a man and survive here, and how to be a man and survive with your home life. You know, he's taught me a lot of that. It's not just simply, hey, teach me how to turn the fuse when the heat starts. It's you know, how to be a real human being. It's more what I get from him.
Hey, man, you grew up in a family of wrestling. Your dad was always gone, and now you're always gone. How do you like living life on the road? Because, man, living life on the road for me was heaven, and I dug it. And sometimes I'd be out on the road, and it might be for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks sometimes, and I was dying to get home. But speaking for myself, sometimes when I got home, I was like, you know, I was ready to get home. But when I got home, I was ready to get back out on the road. How has the WWE schedule been on you? Has the grind okay to deal with? Is it pretty much 4 to 5 days a week in the ring? I mean, back in the day, we were working double shots on Saturdays and Sundays, which totally sucked ass. I don't recommend double shots for nobody. But and then once I got enough stroke, homie didn't play that. So how is life on the road for you? Do you dig being on the road? Hey, man, when you get a chance to call a few shots, you got to call a few shots. How you like living on the road, Bray?
You know, I look at it like this. I'm going to live as hard and as fast as I possibly can while I can still do this. Like I said, it's the traveling and the waiting and the pressures of thinking. That's what they pay me for. And the in-ring stuff, you know, that's what I do for fun. But I look at it as, you know, go hard now, and then you'll get to enjoy the fruits of the labor later in your life. And that's where I want to be. You know, I want to provide as best I can for as long as I can, so that when I'm done, I'm done, and I'm going to stay around where I live, and I'll be able to enjoy all the hard work I put in my entire life, you know.
You got to make hay while the sun shines, and that sounds like what you're doing. Like you said, and at 27, you got to get it while the getting's good, and right now it is.
Yeah.
Later on down the road, in 10 to 15 years, you can segue into that lucrative radio career.
Yeah.
Hey,
big spot open for me.
Yeah. We'll do the Bray and Steve show. We'll be a podcast. We'll talk about everything but wrestling. Hey, man, talk to me about your brother Bo, because I know y'all don't talk about the fact that you guys are related on WWE, on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown, anything like that. But how big of a support system have you been for him and him for you? Because I'm a believer. I like what your brother's doing. He's a breath of fresh air. He's doing things that are a little bit different. At first, when he came out, you know, he's a good-looking kid. He had that cheesy smile, and I said, man, what is this? And then I kept watching him do those promos and do his victory lap around the ring. So I dig what your brother's doing. How proud of you or of him and vice versa?
Kind of cool, because we got to get into it together, and it reminded me of, you know, growing up with my dad and Barry. You know, they were always a team together and best friends. And, you know, me and my brother are pretty close. We saw ourselves in the business a lot differently. He was always naturally gifted in ring. You know, I was not as gifted as him. He, when he's in the ring, he reminds everyone that watched him of Barry. And unfortunately, his time in the WWE, he hasn't really gotten a chance to show exactly everything that he can do, because he can do a lot.
Right.
He will get that chance, and he's only 24, you know, and what lifers, man. We're not trying to come to the WWE to go and become movie stars. This is what we do, and this is what we want to do. Because I wouldn't do a movie, especially if it's a horror movie, but that's, neither here nor there. He is going to be a big star here, too. And we've known that since we were little kids, giving off power bombs on the trampoline to all the neighbor boys against their will. This is who we are. This is who we'll always be.
Hey, how'd that spider walk come about?
Oh, that's interesting. Randomly one day, I was working with Terry Taylor and Jim Mercury down in Florida. Both of them have been extremely influential as far as little tidbits I've done. Little pieces of my character and my career. But literally, I threw someone in for a hard buckle and they moved. And I caught myself, and I was just bending backwards. I don't know why. I'd never be able to explain what was going through my mind at that point in time, but I just hung upside down by the ropes, and everyone around me went, whoa. You know what I mean? It was just like one of those things. I wasn't trying to experiment with it. I just did it. And it evolved later on down the line. I was at a live event somewhere, and I was just hanging there, and I go, man, I wonder if I could catch myself. I just dropped, and I caught myself with my arms, and I just started walking and just listening to the crowd and freaking out over it. And it was baffling to me. And when I came back, something's good when all the boys are going, wow, man, that was crazy, that was cool. And it was just something that fit with the character and happened accidentally, which another great inspiration of mine, Woman Smiley, told me that that's how he figured out a lot of his things, you go out there and you just accidentally do something, and then you go, wow, and that worked. And that's the experience part of this, That's why it takes so long to get good at this, in my opinion, because you have to experiment. You have to fall on your face. You have to fail to ever see any kind of success and understand what works and what doesn't. And Spider Walk is an example of something that accidentally worked.
Where did the Follow the Buzzards come from? I dig that.
It was, I was on my way to FCW one morning. And people ask me all the time, what does it mean? And it's so simple. And it was right after I got hurt. And my promo was going to be, where it was Bray, where it's Bray. And I was driving to the woods where I lived, and there was an open pasture. And I looked out, and there was just a gigantic circle of buzzards. And I was thinking to myself, oh, man, some died under there. And then it just snapped, I was thinking in my head, where's Bray? Where's Bray? He's where all the dead things lie, where all the hate lies. Where's Bray? Follow the buzzards. And it just stuck. It was something like, it was right in line with Bray. Everything he says is so confusing, but so rational. And if you follow the buzzards, and that's where they led you to Bray, what is normally under a bunch of buzzards, follow you to death, basically.
Hey, man, I'm on WWE.com. I'm looking at your merchandise. How much of a hand do you have on the creation of your merchandise?
I'm not really a huge, hey, get me a t-shirt out now type of guy. That's not really who I am. But when they ask me what I want, I say, give me death metal shirts, because that's what I think is cool. And I don't like shirts that just to collect and use a pro wrestling shirt. I want my shirts for those who know it was stand for something, but everyone else who sees it goes, man, that's a cool shirt. that's basically my input on that.
I dig the Buzzard logo, and the follow the
Yeah.
Buzzards. Man, that's a money maker for the next 10 to 15 years just off that one thing. But these moccasin slippers and the boots and some of the other stuff, I don't know about, but I'd be marketing the living hell out of follow the Buzzards. Man, but my point is passive income. You got to take a few bumps in the ring and tell a story and get some heat on somebody and put your body on the line to get paid in the arena business. But this is that income that you can make, and still you gotta remember you're a commodity, you're a product, and you got to be able to look at that side of it. So this is, again, as I was talking to earlier about Cesaro and offering my comments, I'm offering my comments here, which are not solicited by you. My observation is they need to work on your merchandise a little bit better. These damn little dolls they got on the front of this shirt are pissing me off. I see the damn Wyatt family is way more aggressive, way more cool than, like you said, Gwar, along those lines, Zombie, Danzig. That's the vibe I'm feeling. So, yeah. And you don't want to just go out there and wear Bray Wyatt shirts because that wouldn't be your character or your gimmick. I dig that. But when people go to WWE.com and go to check out your merchandise, they've got to have some cooler stuff than this for you. And again, that was said by Steve Austin, not by Bray Wyatt. Bray, as we speak right now, I'm chilling at the Broken Skull Ranch. It's deer season. This is a big part of my life. This is a big part of who I am. It's what I do. I come out here. I have 2,100 acres, and I have four-wheelers, and I have Polaris Rangers, and I like to be by myself because I'm a hermit. Now, my wife is here, and my 3 dogs are here, but I'm a hermit. So in your free time, is there any hobbies you pursue, any outdoor activities? Do you hunt? Do you ride four-wheelers? What does Bray Wyatt do when he's not doing family-oriented stuff? Left to your own devices, how do you occupy your time to try to get away from the business?
I'm a Jeep Wrangler guy. I live in the woods, and there is endless trails out here for Jeeps and four-wheelers and that type of thing. I like to get out in the woods and destroy my vehicle and dance with them a little bit. I like the water. I like to be out on the water and around the water. I spend some time down at the Keys. I got some family down there. And, I like to fish. I like to spearfish, catch lobsters, Hunting has never really been my thing.
Yep.
Just because I just never really was around it. But I think that spearfishing is just such an intense way to hunt because I like the feeling of I'm not just waiting for them to walk by. I'm also watching something that could take me out too. I like the thrill of being in danger and hunting at the same time. So spearfishing is something I really enjoy. It's just.
Well, that being said, are you an adrenaline junkie? Are you a guy that would jump out of an airplane and just go parachuting because they needed a thrill?
My feet stay on the ground or in the water.
Dude, I dig that.
I ain't trying to jump out of an airplane. That's Justin Gabriel's deal.
I'll tell you what, if someone was trying to convince me to jump out of an airplane with a parachute on my back, they're going to have a hell of a shoot fight on their hands. I'm not saying I'm the toughest guy in the world, but I don't think there's a human being in the world who could throw me out of an airplane.
Especially if you had me jumping out of an airplane with a grown man on my back like a backpack. I don't see the fun in that.
As I said earlier, Bray, homie, don't play that either. Hey, right now, as we speak, a young man named Roman Reigns is recovering from a hernia surgery. Roman obviously come from the school there with you. You guys have been feuding, obviously enemies but friends within the structure of the business. As he gets well, I'm wondering, is he watching what's going on? Is he learning while he's down with an injury? My question to you is, when you had your pectoral injury tear when you had your pectoral tear and you were on the mend, what were you doing? I mean, what changed in your mind about how you perceived the business? Because when I was down with the neck surgery, it was hard for me to watch, but I watched, and I learned a lot just from watching and studying the business. What did you learn when you were gone?
Well, just like I said earlier, Triple H has been instrumental in everything that I've been able to accomplish. It's his will to believe in me that has helped me accomplish everything I've been able to do. So when I went down, the day out of surgery, I'm calling the director of NXT saying, "You better not take me off television. I'm more than capable of being on this television show. This is my show now, you know." And it was, let me talk. Hunter said, yeah, man, I'll do exactly that. And that was kind of like how they gave me a Harper and Rowan, you know, as an instrument to keep me on the show so that I was still progressing, because I was not willing. You know, when you're down there and grind, and it's different in Roman's situation where he's already up here and he's done some great things already. At that point in my career, I was not willing to take a second off. I had to keep moving forward because it was an obsession, and Hunter gave me that chance and believed in me, and he still does. As I went forward with that, you know, it helped me progress on the microphone, because I'd have 4 or 5 promos a night, and I didn't have nobody sitting there writing stuff for me, and it was all on me, and that's what kind of helped me just go, man, you know, just go out there and be who you are, and they'll get it. They'll get it because they can see what's real. That's how it happened, you know. So it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, getting hurt.
I found that when I was injured, and I spent time making some of the arena shots, that when I was ringside, just being a second for a guy or managing a guy, whether it was Mankind, you know, when he was working with Owen or whatever, I watched the match differently as a spectator, so to speak. I was sure I was one of the boys, but I was down with an injury. It's one thing to be on the apron of a match, getting ready to tag in, looking at the flow, seeing what the guys are setting the table for, how you will go in and keep that process going. But one step removed, just there close to the ring and watching the action in the ring, I learned a lot, and just, it was a whole different experience for me. Was it for you?
As far as being hurt and watching,
Yes.
It made me more. Like, I probably came back too early, and I worked through it, and, you know, I built some strength back up, but I couldn't stand to be away. It was driving me nuts. To see guys succeeding in a spot that I knew was mine, or doing things that I was going to do, you know what I mean, move-wise and things like that. I even saw a fellow, I'm not going to mention any names, of people, like, when I went down, kind of taking pieces of the Bray Wyatt character and trying to make them their own when I'm away.
Right.
And I wasn't, like in the words of Steve Austin, no, we don't play that, you know. So I wasn't willing to let it go that easily. I was going to reinforce that I'm here, and that I can't let anyone take that from me, because this is mine. This is my baby, and this is my obsession. And I learned that how tenacious I could be when I wanted to be from all that.
And so I'll say this to the WWE superstars that are listening to the show, so that you don't have to. But in speaking with you, you have the mindset of succeed at all costs. Now, you ain't trying to go out there and step on anybody's foot, but you're out there, you believe in yourself 100%. You're committed to being the absolute best that you can be, and you have earned a spot that you will not relinquish no matter what happens. Much the same mindset when I came to WWF way back in the day as a ringmaster. A suck-ass gimmick, but I got my foot in the door, and then the Stone Cold thing happened, and I became truly what I was in a competitive environment. And I was there to have the number one spot, and be damned who was there. And I had respect for the guys that were ahead of me, but my goal was to be the number one guy. Some of the shows that I've been to lately, it just seems like, the business has changed a little bit. The political waters that the boys must navigate are a little more treacherous. There's a lot more bodies to go through in regards to passing an idea along or getting through to someone who's in charge or will listen to you. But at the end of the day, I guess what I'm saying is to anybody in the business, whether you're down in TNA, WWE, whatever, man, if you're in this business, you've got to have a set goal and strategy to get to the top and not to walk on eggshells. And don't be afraid to push buttons, ask questions, and get your point across, and developing a relationship with the powers that be, because its communication process is a key element in your rise to the top of the ladder. My relationship with Vince McMahon when I first came to the company was 0, and then it started progressing. And the higher up on that card you get, the more depth that relationship gains, and it's trust and it's respect and it's a business partnership. So you've weathered that storm. You've done those things. And so that's my message to you young cats out there and to the guys in the WWE right now. You always hear the people on the internet, Bray, so-and-so's holding these guys down. No, man, sometimes booking is what it is, but nobody's in the WWE or any promotion for that matter seemingly to hold anybody back. They're trying to put out the best superstars they can and put asses in seats at the end of the day. Am I correct?
No, 100% correct. It's hard to explain, but you got to keep your nose to the ground at all times to make it here, and that's the lesson everyone learns when they first come up. First you're the shiny new toy, and when there's a new shiny toy, then you gotta get brought to the wayside, and then it's on you to find a way to freshen yourself up and get yourself back to the limelight. And that's something it's a tough thing, but it's what you have to go through to progress here, and you want that. That's the competitive environment you speak of, because when you go down and you're not in the spot that you want, you have to find a way to get there. And I still have a long way to go in my career, but I look forward to those type of situations because that's what this is. That's what it's supposed to be like. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. But it's the ones that have that drive and that will to keep going through all that crap. And when they come out the other side, man, it's so much sweeter when you tasted all that defeat and then to come out that other side. Ooh, what a feeling.
Hey, Bray, to wrap this thing up for the go-home, one tackle drop down, give me a hip toss, I'll feed you in for the Sister Abigail. Yeah, homie calls a high spot just like that. And put myself in your finish. Take me through Sister Abigail. How'd you come up with the son of a gun? How'd you name it?
The maneuver or the actual character, Abigail?
No, let's talk about Abigail first.
I don't like to give away a ton, but
you talking about King Diamond? Or
Abigail, no, Sister Abigail is to Bray Wyatt is basically like his god. So the Bray Wyatt character was raised almost orphan-like, but was almost like I wouldn't say Antichrist, but was raised to be this deity, this god, and Abigail is inserted into Bray Wyatt as the finisher, so to speak. I explained it as her touch could save the world, and her kiss burns it all to the ground. So in itself, it's not just a finishing move; it's almost a place in time, a transgression, if you will. But where I got the actual maneuver, I have no idea. I saw it in a tape somewhere, probably sent from Japan, but the real driving force behind it is the Abigail character, the kiss and the dance and all that. It was instrumental to the success of Bray Wyatt.
Now, what were you using as a finish when you were Husky Harris? or did you have a finish? When I came in as a ringmaster, I was looking up the lights. My finish was what everybody said was what anybody was going to hit me with.
I think I started out on NXT TV, and I did the senton one time, and everyone just loved it, loved the way it looked. So my senton became my finish for a while, and I rolled with that for quite some time. But then I came across that move, and Joey Mercury, again, put his name out there. He was instrumental in helping me come up with when I dance with the character and Abigail's kiss and all that type of thing. You know, he helped me come along with all that, but the senton was my original finish.
But see, the thing about that Sister Abigail I like is no matter how big you are, who you are, whether you're, that dude that wears that white bull outfit or you're 7 foot tall Big Show, you can give that thing to anybody. And that's important when you're trying to come up with a finish, because if you're doing something that a top guy ain't going to take, you got the wrong finish, because you ain't never going to get to give it to him.
Yeah. and it is like, that's kind of the rule of thumb whenever you're giving a finish in developmental is, hey, man, can you give that to Big Show? And if your answer is yes, then it's a go. If not, then maybe you can use it for today, but we're going to try to come up with something different for you in the future. And an honor it has been to give it, actually do it to Big Show and prove to everyone, yeah, look, I can. See? It's kind of an honor in itself.
Well, Bray, I'm going to wrap this conversation up right here, man. It was good talking to you. I've been a big fan of your progression since you got in the business. Obviously, I stated earlier, every time I cross paths with you, which is very seldom, I enjoy speaking with you. Keep up the good work, keep up the learning process, and keep up the hunger, because, as you know, that's what it takes to stay on top and to keep furthering the progress and carry yourself to the holy grail of being a world champion, putting asses in seats, living out your dream.
Right on, man. I appreciate the time. I look forward to the next one.
All right, Bray. We'll catch you down the road. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another classic episode of The Steve Austin Show. Please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends. For more Steve Austin Show, go to PodcastOne.com. That's PodcastOne.com.